أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من عمل صالحًا ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فنحيينه حياة طيبة ونجزينهم أجرهم بإحسان ما كانوا يعملون صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين. I bear witness that there is no other God but Allah. I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is the last, the final messenger of Allah, after whom no prophet, old or new, will come. And I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. The verse of the Quran that I have recited in Arabic is taken from chapter 16. And I interpret it in English as follows. Whoever performs well, whether male or female, and is a believer, we will definitely ensure them a good living and surely reward them at the level of their best performance. This verse of the Quran and other verses as well clearly indicates to us that there is no difference between a male and a female so far as morality and spirituality is concerned. Allah assures us that there is no difference between a man and a woman in their moral and spiritual development. In other words, there are equal opportunities for everyone to develop themselves morally and spiritually. The differences we have are merely physical, biological, and of course the other effects of that, our genetic makeup. But our soul and our spirit, it's the same. It's similar to each other. We all have the same capacity to develop our personality and character, which is our soul. And so what the Quran indicates to us quite clearly on several occasions is that both male and female can rise to the same eminence, rise to the same heights. In fact, the Quran says, I do not allow to be wasted the effort of any worker among you. I do not allow to be wasted the effort of any worker among you, whether male or female. So the efforts and behavior of male or female are certainly rewarded by Allah equally. Of course, each person will have a different development, some may be at a higher level, some may be at a lower level, depending upon our circumstances and our resources. But with these guidelines from the Quran, the Ahmadiyya Anjuman has brought to the world in the 20th and 21st century a very important principle. And that is a very important campaign, and that is to carry on this campaign to keep women and women in the forefront by recognizing their status and dignity to which Allah and His Messenger has elevated them. Remember, at the time when the Prophet Muhammad came, women were in a really bad state all over the world. Ill-treated, abused, murdered, raped, and committed crimes against them, lack of rights and a lot of responsibilities. Of course, there were one or two exceptions in certain areas. But the Prophet Muhammad, by coming with the religion of Islam, the guidance that was given to him by God, certainly uplifted and elevated the status of women. And Muslim women today are more educated than they have been in the past. We have now far more professional Muslim women than we have had in our parents' or grandparents' generation. So it is widely known that women can be teachers of religion, can pray in the mosque, and can mix into the community as Muslims with virtue, with honor, with modesty, and with dignity. Because the Quran tells us that believers, men and women, are friends of one another. They can communicate with each other. They can be friendly with each other in the doing of good. They insist on doing goodness, and they refrain from doing wrong. So there are some people who say that Islam promotes the segregation of the sexes. Why is that so when the Quran says, no, men and women are friends of one another, but there's a condition, and that is they insist on doing goodness and refrain from doing wrong. So that's why we have in our community, in our Jamaats, in our Anjuman, admixture of male and female who perform certain functions. Ahmadiyya Anjuman, as you know, has had a president a woman, it has had secretary and treasurers women in the past, and it has had key positions observed by women in so many ways. It has introduced the first woman to give Jumu'ah Khutbah, Khatib, and Eid sermon in this mosque in the Western Hemisphere, was a member of our Jamaat, Dr. Anisa Ahmad, who did it in 1995 and gave her Jumu'ah Khutbah as well as Eid sermon. And the Quran quite clearly points out to us that believers, men and women, are friends of each other. They insist on doing goodness and refrain from doing wrong. They are upstanding in prayer and contribute to the community welfare. That means paying of the zakat, contributing to community welfare, the community welfare fund, which is what zakat is, and comply with the attributes of Allah and His Messenger. As for these, Allah will reward them spiritually, as Allah is always empowering, always strengthening. The Quran teaches us that our relationship with God is not merely just an idol that we bow down and worship. Our relationship with God is such that He empowers us. He gives us the strength and energy. So He's always strengthening us to face the challenges of life. That strength, that inner strength that we have, comes from Allah. Ahmadiyya Anjuman has set up Muslim marriage officers among women. And in so many ways, in fact, in some countries of the world, women even lead the prayer. Even in mixed gatherings, in some places, some parts of the world. So as Muslims acquire more knowledge of Islam, and they become more firm in the propagation of Islam, they develop virtuous qualities in the home and demonstrate them in public as they strive hard to be morally and spiritually upright. That is what is needed in the world today. We tend to feel that men alone are the ones to show the right way, what is right and what is wrong. But women have an important role to play, and they are equally responsible for propagation of Islam. And inshallah, tomorrow at AAII village, when the Ahmadiyya caravan goes there, their theme is Women in Islam. And more of that will be highlighted there as to the contribution that the Ahmadiyya Anjuman has made to the upliftment and status, uplifting the status of women. So that we as members of the Anjuman, we insist that women shall accept their rightful status in Islam according to the Quran. Unfortunately, among some Muslims, there's a grave error prevailing. And what is that? It is that wife beating is permitted, that a man can beat his wife. That is a common saying that many people have, and some people enjoy making that statement, that Islam permits that a man could beat his wife. There's nothing more rubbish than that and more wrong than that. Some Muslims, in trying to tone down this particular expression, they have stated that the Prophet Muhammad said, yes, you could beat your wife, but use a toothbrush. That's how they tone it down. They object, they know it is objectionable. They know it is not a principle of Islam, but they see some kind of hadith, so they say, well, that is what is meant, that the Prophet Muhammad said here. I want you to know that it is not true. And I want to emphasize it. It is not true that the Prophet Muhammad has said that a wife can be beaten with a toothbrush. And when they say toothbrush, they mean that toothstick that we call that one, or miswak in other languages, other countries. So if you have to beat her, it says to use that toothbrush. That is pure nonsense. The Prophet Muhammad never said that. Because if wife beaten were a command of Allah in the Quran, if that was a command of Allah, not even the Prophet Muhammad could have altered it. He could not have altered God's command. The Quran says he follows what is revealed to him. And he could not say, if God says to beat you, beat a woman, or beat a man, or beat a wrongdoer with 50 lashes or 60, he couldn't change that. So if God had ordered the beating of women or men or whatever, Prophet Muhammad could not say yes, but use a toothbrush as the case may be. That is, how could the Prophet Muhammad enjoin wife beating when he is described by Allah in the Quran as a merciful one, a mercy, a rahmatul lil alameen, a mercy, a kind person to all the worlds, all in every age and time. So this man who is considered a rahmatul lil alameen, a merciful person, how could he be one who orders women should be beaten or wives should be beaten? And he is also described in the Quran as compassionate to the believers. He is compassionate to the believers. When the Quran says that, how can we come up with this idea that he says that something is either wrong with the... Well, there is no hadith about that. Somebody said that this is interpreted, and because it is in the books of hadith, they say there's a hadith and people interpret that to mean that the Prophet Muhammad said that. He never said it. Even the believers in the Quran are described as being compassionate among themselves. So husbands and wives and parents and children, they are compassionate among themselves. So how then did this idea of wife beating come about? This is because of a misconception. This misconception that Islam allows wife beating is based on an incorrect translation of the chapter 4 of the Quran, chapter 4 verse 34, where it is allegedly said that if you fear disloyalty of your wife, then beat her. That's the translation they give. But if this verse of the Quran permits wife beating, then chapter 2 verse 228 will also permit husband beaten. The wife could beat the husband. Because what does the Quran says? It says women have rights similar to those against them in an equitable manner, in a just manner. So if you say that a man could beat his wife, the Quran, well, a wife could beat her husband too. And the Quran does speak about what should be done when a husband wants to abuse his wife or desert his wife, or same problems that arise in marriage. It applies to both people, both the male and the female, the husband and the wife. But violence in the home is not a teaching of Islam. It's not a teaching of Islam or of the Quran. The concept of wife beating is not only inconsistent with the teaching of Islam as a religion of peace, it is also a denial of the guidance given by Allah in the Quran. And that guidance is given for our benefit. Let's therefore look at chapter 4 verse 34. And I translate it, I interpret as follows. Many of you may have read that verse of the Quran, or at least part of it. Men are the maintainers of women. My interpretation is men are the supporters of women. Out of whatever abundance Allah has given some of them over others, and out of whatever they gave out of their property, so the well-behaved women are adorable, protectors of private matters as Allah protects. The Quran describes women as adorable, and those to whom you can confide your private matters and they will protect it as Allah protects them. The Quran, the Prophet Muhammad has rightly said, Man sarara musliman sarara Allahu yawm al-qiyamah. Whoever conceals the faults of a Muslim, Allah will conceal his faults or her faults on the day of judgment. But then the Quran goes on in this verse, after having spoken about good women. Of course, everybody is not good. We all make mistakes. We all as human beings, we are, our emotions sometimes get the better of us in a relationship. And so people get angry, they raise their voice, they I said in a previous Khutbah that you can see the individual, you're distant from them. Person is right in front of you. But if you're vexed with them, you shout at them. They're right in front of you, but you're shouting. Why? Because you're mentally putting a distance between you as if they are far away and you have to shout at them. But the Quran tells us that yes, there are people who may have certain, situations do arise. But for those whom you worry about, they are abandoning you. If they want to leave their home, caution them and leave them to settle down. Translation in the Quran by Muhammad Ali is leave them alone in their beds. My interpretation is let them cool down, let them settle down, and prevent them. This is the important verse of the Quran. It is said in other translation, beat them or to chastise them. Those are words that are used. So if they are responsive to you, don't make it way hard for them. Now the Quran uses two sets of words first of all to describe men and women. Two pairs. The words are used singularly in other instances to mean their regular meaning, but it uses the word rijal and nisa. These come as a pair, rijal and kasiran, one nisa. And it uses the word zakar or unsa, as in this verse of the Quran that I recited at the beginning of this khutbah. Now, zakar and unsa refers to the masculinity and femininity, the maleness and the femaleness, the biological and gender differences of human beings. You have two genders, male and female, zakar and unsa. That is what it refers to. But the word rijal and nisa refer to the interpersonal relationships between the sexes based upon the fact that in some relationships, one person is dependent on the other. Rijal comes from the Arabic word rijal, which means foot, to stand up. And nisa means those who are attracted to, those who are dependent on. So rijal and nisa applies to those who are independent, who can stand on their, who have the resources. And nisa means those who are dependent. And it could be either one. The wife can be the rijal, the independent one. The husband could be the one who is dependent. So the rijal and nisa speaks here of, refers when that combination is used to the interpersonal relationships. And because some relationships, as I said, one party is dependent on the other. That dependent may be physical, because the person cannot walk, they are sick in bed. The husband sometimes is sick, the wife has to do everything for him, may not be able to drive, he has to goes to the eye specialist and can't drive back, the wife may do so or so. So they are dependent on each other, financially sometimes, or otherwise. So according to chapter 4, verse 34, where the words rijal and nisa are used, the wife can be the maintainer of the husband if he is physically or financially handicapped, he has lost his job, and she has an income. That's why the Quran allows women to have a dowry, the right to earn property. She's not earning property just to make a big bank account. And I have solved many problems among husbands and wives by explaining the responsibility of the male husband and the wife so far as property matters is concerned, so far as utilization of the financial affairs is concerned. There are some men who think, for example, I have to maintain a woman, I don't want to use her salary at all. And her salary is there, and then he finds that expenses are going up, so he tells her to cut down on this, cut down on that, and she cannot do it. She finds difficulty in doing so, and I have come across cases like these. So I said, why don't you use your wife's salary and as part of the expenses? But being a man, if he grew up thinking that the man has to maintain the woman. But the Quran gives us, says, if she gives some of her property to you, and take it, accept it. That's a verse of the Quran. You give dowry, but if she wishes to give part of it to you, so if she wants to buy groceries for the week or so, or take her expenses and use it for that is something you mutually can agree upon. So A woman is entitled to have her income and share it with the husband and vice versa. So there are times when the husband maintains the wife and there are times when the wife will maintain. If we understand the word Rijal and Nisa in this context, we'll see that the verse makes makes a lot of sense. Because the husband can, as I said, be physically or financially handicapped in some way or the other. So the Quran follows this verse, and how to explain this particular verse about saying chastise them, or as I translated that, prevent them. It gives the context of marriage as a contract. Marriage is a contract. It's called in the Quran a contract. It's called a strong covenant. And in every contract, anytime you make a contract, there are rights and obligations for each party to the contract. There are rights and obligations. And chapter 4, verse 34 outlines not only the responsibilities of the husband and the wife, of the independent and dependent, that whoever is the maintainer, the independent one, whoever is dependent on the other. It also provides guidance for ending the contract. If for some reason that contract has to be broken, has to end, and that is a reality of life. It happens. So this verse is followed by one which indicates that the termination of the contract of marriage must be negotiated. It's something that has to be negotiated. The Quran is a book that promotes peace and harmony, even in the home and family, even when there are problems, major problems at the breakdown of family life. So to prevent an arbitrary breach of contract, chapter 4, verse 34 provides certain guidelines. And the Quran explains that when a relationship goes sour, it may reach a point where one party may abandon the relationship, want to leave the home, and it can be the male or the female, and may threaten to not only to abandon the relationship, but to leave the marital home. And there are some husbands who will say to their wife, if they want to leave home, once you leave here, you're not coming back. Or vice versa. The wife says to the husband, you leave, take everything and go. Don't come back. Change the locks and everything. You can't come back in it. So in doing so, that person is jeopardizing his or her rights. No civilization tolerates desertion. To desert a commitment, it has to be negotiated. It has to be done in a proper way. And the Quran gives abundance of guidance that you don't get in other scriptures. So later in this chapter, the Quran also indicates that a woman can be worried about her husband leaving the home. The woman has a responsibility to the husband. What should you do? You can't negotiate if you abandon the marital home. And so Allah tells us that where there is a concern of one party deserting the wife or the husband, and usually it is the dependent person says, I can't, you think you can buy me or so. It is the responsibility of the other party to prevent such a desertion, and three methods are suggested. So the verse deals with that prevention of desertion of the marital home while negotiation are going on, as to either reconcile or end the relationship. Later on in the Quran, it tells us, a couple of verses later in this particular chapter, after these verses, that guidance is given. So it says, firstly, advise or warn or caution the person that he or she is deserting his or her rights by deserting his or her responsibilities. Once you leave the home, you have certain responsibilities. A woman who was not a Muslim came to me once and said, your husband has left the home. And I said, well, make sure, according to Islamic law, she's not a Muslim, but I give her guidance according to the Quran. Ensure he pays his responsibility, the light bill and the rent and mortgage and whatever it is, and the gas for the vehicle, and she did so. And she was able, at least psychologically, to go through the trauma. It's a long story, it's another issue, but it went on for quite a long time. But there are cases in which women have written to me that they want to commit suicide because of the relationship they have with their husbands, and sometimes it's the other way around as well. So the Quran says that the person must be cautioned. Look, if you leave the home, you're deserted your rights and responsibilities. We still have to eat, we still have to sleep, we have to do things together. It's a joint relationship. Yes, you may want to end it, but you have to realize that there are rights and responsibilities that have to be worked out. Secondly, if the person is emotionally upset, then leave him or her alone until they cool down. And that is a common thing in breakup of relationships, where people become angry and they cry and they want to run out and go somewhere else, or they rant and rave or whatever it is. Quran says, leave them alone. Don't aggravate the situation. Let them cool down. What the Quran, the actual words of the Quran is, let them lie on their sides on their beds. I interpret it to mean let them cool down a little bit. Let them take a rest and don't keep on the argument until, a person becomes so fed up, they begin to leave. And thirdly, if neither of these methods work and the person still seeks to leave, then in their own interest, prevent him or her from doing so. May lock the door. Make sure, they take the keys from the car, whatever it is, so they can't leave. Don't let them leave that. Let them cool down within the home. So the error in interpreting this verse of the Quran lies in the translation of the Arabic word darabu. Darabuha. Daraba means to beat, to hit. This word is normally translated as strike, but it has an extremely wide meaning. Even in English, the word strike has so many meanings. You can strike up a tune. You can strike to hit a person. You can strike by stopping work. You can, there's so many interpretations of strike, and in Arabic it's the same. It's the same in Arabic, many meanings similar to the English meanings. So it has extremely wide meanings in both English and Arabic. Darabu in Arabic, strike in English. The Quran itself in chapter 18 uses the word darabu ala azanihim, which literally means to strike a person on the ears. To hit them on the ears. It doesn't mean that. That's what it says in Arabic. What it means, prevent them from hearing. You stop a person from hearing. If you hit them in the ears, they won't be able to hear. The ears paining or so. So the Quran is not saying that you have to hit a person on the ears. It just means you are preventing a person from hearing. So the words darabu hunna in chapter 4, verse 34, can be translated as prevent them. Just as it's translated as prevent in chapter 18. So it's not contrary to what the Quran itself teaches. Prevent them or restrain them rather than beat them. So this word is misunderstood. Now, Maulana Muhammad Ali has translated as chastise. The word chastise literally comes from chase. Chase means to purify. However, now the meaning has changed, and chase has become meaning, chastise mean to give chastisement, punishment. And people interpret it as beat. So because of a change of the understanding of a word, when he wrote the word chastise 50 or 60 years ago, or more than that, 75 years ago, the word had a different meaning and people understood it in the sense that chastise a person to make them chaste. Just as in English we have the word sanctify, that means sanction, to approve something. But sanction has come to mean to stop something. When one country sanctions another country, it means you can't do any trade with them. But the word sanction doesn't really mean that. It means to approve, and here it means not to agree with somebody. So language and use of words tend to change. So the Quran also goes on to say, and you can understand it, prevent them, if you understand it in that sense, it is consistent with what is stated next. If they obey you, seek not a way against them. In other words, if they are responsive to you, don't make it world hard. Don't make the situation worse for them. In other words, if they obey you by not deserting the home, you yourself must not seek a way to arbitrarily put them out or use threat or desertion against them. So the Quran gives guidelines from Allah pertaining to the delicate relationship between husband and wife, and it is the Prophet Muhammad who said that the best of you is the one who is best to his or her spouse. We don't get these kinds of interpretations in simple words in any other scripture but the Quran. This is why this book is such a unique book, and this is why we are grateful that Allah has given us the Mujaddid of the 14th century, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who has opened our minds to look at the Quran from a new perspective, to realize that all the old customs and traditions have of repeating the status of women in the time of the Prophet Muhammad and bringing them back now Women were prevented from going to mosque. Many mosques didn't allow. Today, women go to mosque all over the world. Still, there are many mosques where women will not be able to sing a song or give a sermon. Now they're doing that in some cases, having women in front of the audience, a mixed audience. So there are a lot of changes that have come about that we take for granted, not realizing that it was brought about by the Ahmadiyya movement. That is why it is so important for us in this Ahmadiyya caravan to reiterate and re-emphasize what contribution our Anjuman has made to the upliftment of women in this country. And I'm sure, inshallah, in AAII village more will be said by the program there is focused on women in Islam. So it is necessary for us for women to stand up and realize that, look, you have a place, you have a role, you have a responsibility, and that responsibility must be fulfilled in order for you, as the Quran says, Allah will reward you indeed at the level best of your ability, your behavior. In the verse that I recited, it says, Allah will reward you at the level of your best performance. So we have to be, women as well as men have to be in their best performance, and they will be rewarded at that higher level. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quran al-Azim wa nafana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim. Innahu ta'ala jawadun kareem malikun barrur raufur rahim. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina may yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa may yudlil fala hadiya lahu wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم. اللهم اخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر.